do want to bring in our front bench now to talk about both this development and, of course, what's happening politically here in Canada. With me this evening, Sharon Carr. She's a CTV News political analyst and former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Laura D'Angelo is with Enterprise Canada and previously worked in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office. Jamie Allerton is a Conservative strategist and the founder and principal of Canaptus. And Sebastian Scampsey is former Director of Media Relations to Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Hey, guys, it's good to have you with us tonight. Laura, I'll start. We have to start on this topic just because it's so... You know, he was such a political figure. We have so few details about what actually happened other than what we were able to see, you know, with our own eyes, and the fact that the president is saying he's dead. How significant do you think this is?
I think this is one of the biggest things to happen in U.S. politics in a long time, and it's going to, I think, change the landscape and change the tensions in the U.S. that are already very high, even more so. And I think a lot of what we're seeing come out from other political leaders, that political violence is terrible no matter what happens and no matter what party, is something that we all really need to remember and hold on to and send our thoughts to his family.
Sebastian, for people who aren't necessarily familiar with Charlie Kirk here in Canada, in your assessment, like, how central a figure is he politically in the U.S.? Was he, pardon me, in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I have to start off by expressing a sincere sorrow over this tragedy. I think it is obvious as a political assassination that occurred. For Canadians who don't know or weren't familiar with following U.S. politics, I think he had an incredible voice for several years. He is, I want to remind viewers, 31 years old. This is a very young person. Yeah. Who, I mean, it obviously adds to the tragedy, but it is important to remember the activism that he initiated and brought forward. I think I'm almost at a loss for words, frankly, because of how harrowing this is. For those who had the misfortune of seeing the video, I think it is extremely shocking. And regrettably, these incidents are occurring in the States. Of course, President Trump had 2 assassination attempts against him, which was, nearly destabilized the campaign and obviously the election. This is, I think, very obviously dangerous, and I'm not really sure how the temperature gets cooled down from here.
Yeah, it's horrifying. There's no other way to put it. Jamie, your thoughts?
Try to let in with your Vashi. I think you're going to see people from across the political spectrum denounce political violence and say this has no place in our system. And I think the other thing that's probably going to revolve or come after this is the reality that it's going to be harder to host public events and gather people because security costs are going to go up, speaking fees are going to go up to pay for all the logistics, and it's going to be harder to have events on places like university campuses and public forums when you essentially have to fortify them to ensure that there's proper screening in places to prevent things like these from happening. So it's going to mean democratic engagement goes down. I think obviously the south of the border, what goes on there is quite different than what goes on in Canada. And I know often here in this country we have our front row seat and watch as if we're watching reality TV and feel like we have a seat at the table. But I think the more we can focus issues closer to home and talk about the grappling issues of what we need to deal with as a country today, that in and of itself would have a cooling effect on our politics here at home.
If you're just joining us now, a key Donald Trump supporter and organizer, Charlie Kirk, just 31 years old, was shot and killed this afternoon in Utah, speaking to a university crowd, something he had done on multiple occasions. Sharon, your thoughts?
Listen, I think this is a really hard one for a lot of people, and I struggle with those who are trying to find some sort of justification around what happened. There's a lot of chatter happening online around the type of speech he had. I don't care, quite honestly. It doesn't matter to me what he believed in and what he preached or what he talked about. At the end of the day, politics is secondary. You're human first, and for someone to do this, it's a sad day not only for the U.S., but it's just a sad day for it should be a sad day for everyone. No one should find political violence acceptable. It does not matter what your political stripe is. We are seeing a rise in toxicity, and we're seeing a rise in people very willingly to speak out towards people they disagree with. And I truly hope that the man who did this has the book thrown at him, and everyone should be denouncing it. Nobody, absolutely nobody, should try to find a justification, because it doesn't matter what his opinion on anything was. He was 31 years old, and this should not have happened.
Yeah, good point to end this part of our discussion on. And certainly, as I've conveyed to our audience tonight, if there is new information that arises from law enforcement or more reaction we can share with you, we will throughout the rest of the evening. Since we are all focused on Canadian politics as well, I do want to turn to some of the big stories that we're covering in that vein. In particular, tomorrow we anticipate that the Prime Minister will make an announcement about this so-called major projects list, something that he has telegraphed now for a very long time. It will be projects that are deemed to be, Laura, in the national interest. The report from Radio-Canada today is that no pipelines on the list. Liberal ministers lined up, or even MPs today, to say, don't worry, this is just the first round. Even Danielle Smith was kind of reflexively saying, I'm not expecting this to be the end of the road. How big of a deal for the Carney government is tomorrow?
I think it's a huge deal for the Carney government, and I think that this piece in particular is really important for the Prime Minister himself, right? His team has tied him very closely to the nation-building project narrative and strategy, and so how he communicates about it and how his ministers communicate about it are really important. I think it's really interesting that we're already seeing Danielle Smith coming out and hedging a little. And I think it shows some of the work that Carney and his team have been doing in the background with the premiers. And I would say that that's something he's been very good at so far since he won, is managing that First Minister's table. And I think that's where we're starting to see some of his business leader skills really come out in politics. And I think that this list, these winners and losers, frankly, is also something that he needs to message carefully. But remember that this is something that Canadians also asked for, right? They voted for him because he has a more business approach to some of government. And that's often what happens in business, is winners and losers are picked and people's feelings might get hurt.
What is the, I guess, potential communications impact, Sebastian, for lack of a better word, that you anticipate from this? And I ask because I feel like the expectations were set very high by the Prime Minister. We're going to get things built, build, baby, build. We're going to get things done. Now this list is coming out, but even that is a list of things that can get approved and fast-tracked in 2 years. Like, in political terms, it's not like next month you're going to see this LNG terminal build. So what does that do to the potential political impact of an announcement like tomorrow?
Well, Vashti, I think you asked the correct question, frankly, and I think some of the context you provide is very accurate. I'm less concerned about the Prime Minister's communications struggles. I am concerned, however, for his vocal cords. He has been exercising them immensely the last 6 months he has been Prime Minister. He's had meetings with everybody under the sun. Last week when we were talking about this, he was having his strategy session with his illustrious cabinet. He's had pajama parties with premiers. I mean, we have heard a lot from the Prime Minister. We have not seen a single thing. And so when I hear that there is a projects list that is coming out tomorrow. And of course, that list doesn't include a pipeline, which I think if you asked any average Canadian what a transnational nation-building, uniting project would be, I think most people would say actually a pipeline that runs across this country would fit the bill. When we're hearing that the expectations are so profoundly low and that really there's only going to be more talk before there's any doing, I think that's very disappointing and concerning for Canadians and our economy. We need these projects now, and we can't really afford to wait 2 more years on the promise that maybe something will be approved by a new office that now exists in Calgary. I think it's deeply troubling.
Sharon, Sebastian's comments reflect something that we've heard frequently, right, from the Conservatives over the past, I think, close to a month, which is, yes, you've been talking a lot, but you actually, when are you going to do something? I feel as though the Carney government views this announcement as a proof point to try and counter that. What will ensure, from your perspective, that it actually materializes as such?
Well, there's a lot. To be honest, there's a lot. Now, what I've been hearing in terms of tomorrow and what they're going to be announcing is there is this concern from a lot of people that why are we hearing there's no pipelines potentially? And to Sebastian's point here, I'll speak from my own experience here is that as a very pro-pipeline liberal, one who spent a very long time trying to get a cross-country pipeline built when Energy East was trying to get built under the Harper government, it is not easy. What I am hearing, though, is that there are conversations between Alberta and Ottawa about a potential proponent who would be willing to do so. Without a proponent who's willing to sink in all that money to get a pipeline built and a company that's willing to do it, you can't build pipelines out of nowhere. And no one wants the government to be in the business of more pipelines. We did that with TMX because the risk was high and we needed to save that. But for tomorrow, we're hearing this is going to be the first tranche of announcements, and there's three main focuses: strategic industries, so things like mining, longer-term projects that are not necessarily shovel-ready, which could be potentially things like Ring of Fire or other projects that are a priority to provinces. And then thirdly,
wait, I thought they were supposed to be all shovel-ready.
Well, there's three criteria, and the third one is trade related. So we're talking about ports. Now, of course, I think pipelines would make a good sense, and I think we want them. But these are discussions that are going to take time. Just to be a realist, it's been 6 months, and I know they've said drill, baby, drill, we're ready to go. But it does take time, and provinces are getting on board, which is why we probably saw Danielle Smith's tone to be a bit more measured in what she does. So I know tomorrow we're going to see the Prime Minister and folks like Don Farrell and Minister Hodgson announcing what's the first tranche of that. And I think that we have to remember that we're looking at it in this lens.
Well, the Prime Minister said second tranche by Grey Cup. Last word to you, Jamie.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why you don't see a pipeline here, Vashi, is because people who build pipelines were essentially told for the past 10 plus years that they weren't welcome to do business in Canada. And we actually had to nationalize the expansion of the Kinder Morgan pipeline to actually see that project through after result of the previous government's policies. So I think what we're going to see tomorrow is effectively day one of Prime Minister Carney losing his political cover of pointing backwards and blaming the previous guy for our current challenges and kind of laying the groundwork. I think the fact that the Major Projects Office is being headed by an industry veteran and quite frankly getting praise from accolades from across the political spectrum, across the Western Canada and across the business industry for knowing how to do these things. She gets both the government side and the energy industry side to move this forward. And I think tomorrow's kind of the starting day for getting a lot of these things in the ground. I think you're going to have a lot of people try and debate what utopia ought to be and how to do this perfectly. But those debates kind of maybe play to political extremes and those in the political debate, but they're not going to actually attract the investment dollars needed to get all these things going. Because at the end of the day, taxpayers can't foot the bill for all of this. And that inherently lies the challenges Prime Minister Carney faces in getting these projects online quickly.
Okay, that list is coming tomorrow. Can't wait to get your analysis after, everyone. Thanks so much for making the time.